Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and DHEC's Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management.
Coping with COVID with Trey Taylor.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Thank you so much for joining us for Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. I'm Trey Taylor, and it is Wellness Wednesday. And with so much happening with COVID and the vaccine, giving you a vaccine update with Dr. Jonathan Knock with DHEC. He's going to join us a little bit later. Plus, it's Eating Disorder Awareness Month, and we'll talk about this rarely discussed condition with an expert who has not only changed her life, but is doing the same for so many others. Double board certified Dr. Sylvia Boley, a medical doctor from the DMV area, is a certified obesity expert and healthy lifestyle champion. Thank you, beautiful, so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here. And thank you for the work that you do. This is much needed. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We look forward to the conversation. That and more coming up next on Wellness Wednesday. It's brought to you by In It Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. I'm Trey Taylor. DHEC and vaccine providers are getting over $200 million in COVID-related expenses. The funds go to DHEC, MUSC, hospitals, and smaller vaccine providers for staffing, facility rentals, PPE, mobile health units, marketing campaigns, and testing, plus contract tracing and more. Lawmakers say they will also focus on rural areas. More about the vaccine coming up on Coping with COVID. North Carolina educators can be vaccinated beginning today as that state moves into Group 3 of eligibility. Anyone working in the schools, including bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and teachers, can make an appointment regardless of their age. Now, with many North Carolina schools back open, some school districts are holding specific events for their staff. Others, like CMS, Charlotte-Mecklenburg School Systems, have partnered with Novant Health for appointments. And the Kroger Center in Columbia, South Carolina, has partnered with the Blood Connection for a blood drive tomorrow from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. All donors will receive a $20 gift card. SCDHEC has your most up-to-date list of times, dates, and location for COVID testing and vaccines in and around South Carolina. Visit scdhec.gov for more information. You can also visit gogettested.com. You can get appointments and results in 48 hours, not only in South Carolina, but also in Texas, DC, and Kansas. Now, if you want to know about organizing a COVID screening in your event or at your neighborhood, that information is located at the bottom of the screen. And the DHEC Care Line is available also for testing, transportation to get a test, and the COVID vaccine. Richland and Carrollton County paramedics are also offering in-person COVID testing. If you or someone you know is immobile and unable to get to a COVID test, call 911 for more information about that. And appointments are available this week for COVID vaccinations at Lexington Medical Center. All you have to do is contact the information is on the screen and make your appointment for either your first or your follow-up dose of the COVID vaccine. Now, of course, veterans who want their COVID vaccine can check out the VA. They have all of your information concerning COVID vaccinations. And COVID vaccines are also being done at several pharmacies in South Carolina. That includes Kroger, CVS, and Public. Check the screen for more information about that. Plus, all of this information will be scrolling at the bottom of the screen throughout the show. Now, if you need some help with housing, SC Housing is giving rental and mortgage assistance. They've got about $300 million that they are allocating for folks. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. If you need that information, it's up on the screen, 833-985-2929, or visit scstay.org. The NAACP in South Carolina is also offering housing assistance for landlords, mortgage companies, and tenants. Contact the Columbia branch of the NAACP to get hooked up with that. Finally, the South Carolina Bar Association at SC Legal Services is also offering a toll-free number and website for rental and mortgage help. You can see that information on the screen. And the City of Columbia is offering a 6-month payment plan for water bills and payment assistance up to 75%. Now, the Central Carolina Community Scholarship is open and available for students and adults. If you want information about that, you can see that. They've got $3 million in scholarships available. And if you need help with virtual learning or working, go to Rashonda Pratt's YouTube channel, hit subscribe, and make sure you check her out. She's got some great resources and great information available. We talked to Rosalind Goodwin last week with the South Carolina Hospital Association about open enrollment for the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and that's open until May. Make sure you go to either healthcare.gov, sign up sc.org, or call 888-998-4646. There are folks standing by and available to help you get through the process of finding a great health care plan for you, and many of them are free. They have no premium at all because you could qualify for a subsidy. A couple of job openings to tell you about. Rapid Reliable is having a job fair. Well, not really a job fair. They've got several job openings available. Contact Rapid Reliable for more information. They also are offering COVID testing in South Carolina. And Chick-fil-A and 5 Points in Columbia has 18 full-time job openings starting at $14 per hour. You can apply this Thursday, tomorrow, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, SC-DO, located at 700 Taylor Street. Finally, as I mentioned in the news portion, Blood Drive is happening tomorrow from 10 until 6 at the Kroger Center in Columbia. If you donate blood or plasma, you will receive a $20 Visa gift card. I'm Trey Taylor, and you're watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It's Wellness Wednesday, and it's brought to you by In It Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. Listen, if you have diabetes and would like to know how to keep your diabetes manageable, Dr. Nancy Richburg is looking for you to participate in a virtual class this month. Now, if you live in South Carolina, you can register. You see the information on the screen. The program is statewide, year-long, on Zoom, so it doesn't matter where in the state you live, you can certainly get that information. Once again, Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday right here on Coping with COVID. Hey, don't forget that we are actually streaming live on the In It Together Facebook page. Please go over there, hit like and share, and find out about all the information they have available. They also have a website, the In It Together website, that you can get information from. We're also streaming live on the home of Coping with COVID, which is on Facebook on the Tailor Made Production page. Please go over there and hit like and follow. And not only can you watch Coping with COVID, you can also get all of your COVID-related updates. We're also streaming live on YouTube. But to say hello to everyone who is watching us on YouTube and ask you to please hit the subscribe button. Want you to make sure that you post and share this information out so we can get the message to the masses, because this is such a condition that we really don't talk a lot about. It is eating disorders. Again, something very few people really know about or even understand. Dr. Sylvia Boley is a medical doctor and a double board certified obesity expert, healthy lifestyle champion, and great listener. I love that, who specializes in empowering women to stop obsessing over the scale and embrace self-love and personalized science to get to their happy place. The healthy weight and optimal wellness. Dr. Boley has personally maintained 60-pound weight loss for over 67 years, and she's the CEO and lead physician of Embrace You Weight and Wellness. She believes that you should choose to embrace you. It's the foundation of lifelong weight loss and wellness. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for talking about this much needed topic.
Yeah, and you know what? It is really much needed because we don't talk a lot about it. It's just one of those things that it's particularly in the African American community. It's just not talked about. So I thank you for being a champion of this. So let's talk first. What is an eating disorder?
So the official APA, or the official psychological association definition of it, it is a psychological condition that affects your feeding behavior or your eating behaviors. That's the official definition of it. And so the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, or the DSM-5, it has 8 that have been assigned as the eating disorders, or 8 formally recognized recognized eating disorders.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there are 8 formally recognized eating disorders. Do you get it? Do you have it? Or do you develop it?
Ah, that's such a good question. Chicken and the egg. Isn't that always the question?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So really they've done studies to kind of figure out what is it. So there are many things that affect it. So it can be, yes, there's some genetic predisposition to getting eating disorders. So when we look at functional brain MRIs and we look at studies and things like that, it seems like, yes, there's some parts of the brain that light up differently in people with eating disorders. But then there's other epigenetic factors, so factors in their environment, in their social environment that contribute to it. Certainly, we see higher levels of eating disorders among certain populations, certain professions, dancers, for instance,
Right, right.
even certain medical conditions. Just this morning, I was doing a talk about PCOS and the link with eating disorders. It's both biochemical, it's environmental, and it is genetic. So it's multifactorial.
Right. Now, do women mostly get it? Because I know you mostly work with women as you,
Mhm.
you know, in your intro, you help women get to their happy place, wherever that
Mhm.
is, girl. I'm still trying to find that one. My happy place is. But is it primarily women?
Yes, so the more women tend to get it than men. And it's interesting, you mentioned Black women. And I don't know, did you watch the Salt and Pepper? They had their
There's a
lifetime bio.
documentary. No, girl, let me tell you, let me just, I have a 2 and a 5-year-old. So if it's not Paw Patrol or Daniel Tiger, girl, I don't know what's going on, but I know about it. I do know
Yes.
about it.
Well, I have a 2-year-old also and an 8-year-old. So it was watched when she went to bed. So that was
Girl,
my
I'm
Saturday.
asleep then. I need some of what you got because I have to go to sleep when they go to sleep. I'm exhausted. But anyway, I digress.
Yes. Well, I bring it up just because I was interested. I found it interesting to learn that Cheryl James, so Salt, that
So,
she actually had bulimia. So when
oh,
we talk about the most common, yeah. So most of the time when she was her thinner self, when she was in Salt and Pepper, a lot of that was because she was had purging herself. So I think that was a good example in the sense that, people could be living with this and we don't even know. And the demographic is about 75% more women will have it and about 25% men. Men, when I talk about groups of people, we're talking about usually athletes, people having other sort of psychological disorders or mental health illnesses may develop eating disorders as well. But yeah, women are by far more affected.
well, you mentioned the Salt and Pepper story. Now, I did watch Wendy.
See, I didn't catch Wendy.
And she said, and I didn't catch the movie, I catch the docuseries. She said that she had an eating disorder, but when she
Mm,
found out that you could get your teeth could decay from the constant
mhm,
regurgitation, she stopped. So,
mm.
so I thought that was interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of eating
Mhm.
disorders.
Absolutely. So the three most common, and like I said, there are 8. So I'll focus on 3 most common, which you tend to probably hear more about. So anorexia nervosa is the first one, and this one is going to be marked. And the way I like to think about them is, what's the impact on body weight? Because a lot of times people think that everyone who has one is going to be underweight, and that's a way that people can have disordered eating and kind of float through the radar. Because on the outside, kind of like Cheryl James, she was thin, but she
Yeah.
wasn't, yeah, she didn't look too thin. So no one really was concerned about what she was doing to maintain that body weight. So, but anorexia is the one that we classically think of where the person is restricting what they're eating and it leads to them being underweight. Their body essentially goes into starvation mode.
Mm,
And they begin to eat themselves, if you think about it, which is a very
wow.
scary way to think because they
Yeah.
have to break down muscle, they break down the muscle, they break down the fat, and they're just then the bone trying to get the nutrients that their body needs to survive. They're not going to be aware that they're thin. It's marked by an excessive fear of gaining weight and
Right.
also an unawareness that you actually have excess weight. So that's the most stark one. We mentioned bulimia nervosa, which for African Americans, when we look at it, is more common. And that's going to be marked by you binging. So a binge meaning eating more than normal. Now, this is where it gets kind of controversial because, like, who defines normal, right?
Right, right,
Like, but
right.
but eating more than normal, but feeling uncomfortable both physically and emotionally with the amount that you've eaten, then that leads you within the next 2 hours to kind of do some sort of compensation to try to get rid of that calories that you've eaten, because you're so afraid of gaining weight, and that your body, your whole self-image, your body image is wrapped around you being this certain weight. Usually they're going to vomit, which is what Wendy was probably
Right,
alluding
right,
to with the
right.
teeth damage. But then they can also do things like exercise excessively, which is something, people will say, oh, good, you ate, now exercise, because that old school calories in, calories out.
Yeah. Wow, wow. We're talking to Dr. Sylvia Bolle. She's a lifelong wellness and weight loss expert, double board certified obesity expert. You can see her information for Embrace You Weight Loss on the screen. And we were talking about eating disorders. This month is Eating Disorder Awareness Month. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to encourage you to please post and share so we can get this message to the masses, because this is something that we just don't talk about enough, but it affects a lot of people, doesn't it, Dr. Bowley?
Oh, yeah, it does. Well, I mean, when we look at the statistics, like I won't be one to like overemphasize it. When we look at the statistics, they're through the map. It says as little as 0.5% of women get this, to 5.2%, depending how you define it. The definition really changed recently also, which makes it broader, because the thought was, in the past, the definition was so narrow, we were missing people who were really not eating in a helpful way or eating in a disordered way.
Right, right, right. Now, do you know if you have an eating disorder? I mean, I know you said, with some of the conditions, you don't even know if you're too fat, if what your weight is.
Mm-hmm.
You're not kind of,
Mm-hmm.
focused on what your weight is.
Absolutely. So I think so another one that I mentioned, so I mentioned anorexia nervosa,
Right,
bulimia
right,
nervosa, but then I didn't talk about binge eating disorder.
right.
And I wanted to mention that one because that is one where you can have a quote unquote normal body weight. And let me be clear, when I say normal, we're using the body mass index, which we could have a whole nother discussion whether that should be used to define weight, right? But for now, that's what all the studies are on. So but you have a body mass index of 25, of between 18 to 24.9. So it falls within the normal range. But in binge eating, they also are going to have normal to overweight. So this is things we will see in my population. I work with people who have obesity, so have a body mass index of greater than 30. And what you'll do is a lot of that yo-yo dieting. You'll go through phases where
Yeah.
you eat a lot and you binge a lot. You won't do any sort of like compensation within the 2 hours like a bulimic. So you won't do the excessive exercise, the vomiting or the laxatives, but you may restrict yourself and then go back to doing the same binge eating. And usually you're going to do more than once a week for over a 3-month period. And those people are very aware. They're not happy with their body image. They know that this pattern is maybe unhelpful and they will seek help. But unfortunately, a lot of clinicians may not recognize this as unhealthy and may actually reward the behavior when they get into that period of when they're like restricting themselves. So I think that's so important to be aware. The bulimic will also know they may hide their behavior for some time, but they're typically disgusted with the amount that they're eating or what they did, which led to the compensation. The most challenging one is the anorexic, who will usually be brought to, or person with anorexia, I should say, will usually have to be brought in by someone else. And then a lot of cognitive training will need to be done to kind of understand, to help them see or raise their awareness of how the damage is causing.
Now, there are two others that I know we want to talk about, and they're emotional eating. And then the other one, obsession with healthy eating. I thought that was so interesting because who would have thought that was an eating disorder?
Exactly. So, see, that's why I wanted to bring it up. So, these two are not formally recognized by the DSM, by the DSM-5, so the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5, which is the formal tool that those other eight fall under. But I thought that it was something that we really should talk about because, again, I feel okay, we're in a real like diet obsessed culture,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And some of that is what drives these eating disorders. Because if you
yeah,
put that someone who is kind of wired to already be overly anxious, overly aware, and you put them in that context with talking to them constantly about what they should eat, good food, bad food, unhealthy. You mentioned kids. Same
yeah,
thing with my children. I'm trying really hard not to label foods as good or bad.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I really talk about the value that the food brings. So same thing. So orthorexia is something that's in recent years these type of people, it goes beyond just is this healthy or unhealthy, but they actually get uncomfortable or they actually cannot eat certain types of food because they think that it's not going to benefit them, and they get really into calorie counting. These are your people who are carb counting. You know, these are your people who are exercising. They're also on every health blog. Every day they're sending you some kind of article about
right,
what to
right.
do. So this more is being done to look into this as an actual condition, and maybe when we look at the Diagnostic Manual 6, maybe recognized more formally. But I work with a lot of people who are emotional eaters as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure, particularly now in the midst of COVID, that's it's a lot of
Hmm.
that, isn't it, Dr.
Oh,
Bolle?
yeah. Yes. I say all the time, you know, as a society, there's some socially acceptable drugs, right? And food is definitely one of them. Coffee is mine. I'm not going to talk about that right now. But food is one because I say, you know, we're taught from a very young age when you're happy, eat. When you're sad, eat. When you're celebrating, eat. When you're mourning, eat. And so if you put that a lifelong relationship with food like that, it tends to just when you're an adult be reinforced and you start to do it on your own. And people also eat for a lot of other reasons as well. Boredom is one that you don't
Yeah,
think about. So emotional eating is just eating for any other reason than being hungry. So I
wow.
think if most of us do some self-reflection, you'll find there's a lot of times when you're just eating just because, you
Right,
know.
and not even thinking about it, you just,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, well, I know that's why that a lot of times they say you shouldn't eat while you're watching TV or reading and stuff like that, because 'cause you're not focusing on the actual act of eating.
Absolutely. Yes. You just really, and you're getting to something called mindful eating. So you really wanting to be present while you're actually eating, because it's very easy if you're even watching a movie, even doing work, you know, people sometimes bring their lunch to their workspace and then they're eating while doing it. And you mentioned during COVID with
Yeah,
all the stress and being home, I've seen a lot of clients who have gained a lot of weight because they're constantly back and forth to the kitchen, you know, and it's just
yeah,
that kind of nervousness, the
yeah.
boredom, trying to multitask with the kids and everything, doing a lot of that.
Yeah, we're talking to Dr. Sylvia Bolle. She is with Embrace You Wellness in the DMV area. I want to say hi to Dr. Stacy Carey Thompson. She says, so interesting. Hey, Stacy, thank you so much for watching. I want you to continue to post and share this information out so we can get this little known, talked about information to the masses. It's a Wellness Wednesday. It is Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. Speaking of that, what about eating disorders with people with diabetes? Dr. Bolle. Is that
Mm.
different than a regular or another kind of eating disorder?
So yeah, I'm glad you asked me that. So definitely people with diabetes are at risk for developing all of the other
Wow.
typical eating disorders we talked about. But I think it's some things that are unique to diabetes is this orthorexia that we talked about. Because if you think about it, when a lot of times with diabetics, we tell them, okay, you need to pay attention to your carbs, you need to pay attention to the sugar you're eating. And so what ends up happening, people who are already primed for this can become overly obsessed with that. Another thing we see is misuse of insulin, where people will actually dose their insulin higher so that they can eat things that they want to eat, or underdose so that they can lose weight. Because we tend to think about, especially when it comes to type 2 diabetes, we tend to think of it as a disease of people who have obesity, right? Because it is associated with it. But in its untreated state, uncontrolled state, diabetes is a wasting disease where people will actually lose weight. So unfortunately, in some forms of eating disorders with people diabetics, they will withhold their insulin so that they can actually lose weight. And that is very harmful as well. So that's something specifically we tend to see
with diabetics. So so let's talk about treatment. Do you treat, first of all, with diabetics, is that a treatment different than someone else who doesn't have diabetes?
I think with diabetes in particular, so for all eating disorders, you need a multidisciplinary or a holistic type approach, right? And for me, I always break things down and think about it. Well, there's 7 dimensions of wellness, so I think about it that way. But in big bucket terms, the psychological and then the physiological. So what's going on in the mind, what's going on in the body, and they're one and the same. Like this, your head is not separated from your body, right? What's going on here is going to go on here. So with diabetics, a lot of the retraining has to be around the vocabulary that we're using. And I think going back to getting partnership with a really well-trained nutritionist who's going to show them the foods that are most helpful and kind of help them unlearn that good and bad behavior. Also getting a psychologist on the team to help them figure out, like, where did this idea of bad versus good versus what your relationship with your body, and really helping to heal your body that way. And of course, if they're working with an endocrinologist that is attuned to that, or with an obesity specialist such as myself, who really tries to delve into the mindset and the holistic approach to weight loss, is important as well.
Well, I want to bring up your website. I know that you have your Embrace You Wellness website, where you particularly treat people who have, eating disorders like this. So what would be, and I guess I know it's not going to be, it's different for everybody, I know. But what would a typical, if you can say typical, and let's just say someone with diabetes or trying to manage their diabetes, what would their plan, quote unquote, look like?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking me that. So first, just to clarify, so as an obesity specialist, I tend to work with people who have a body mass index greater than 30 kilograms per meter square. So who have true medical obesity. So usually anorexia will not fall in my purview. Those people would be referred to a psychiatrist first line, and then also partner with a internist or someone who could help with those electrolyte abnormalities as well. I would tend to see but everyone who I see, I screen for these disorders, because you want to make sure, again, not all weight loss is healthy weight loss, right? Especially if you are not doing it in a helpful way. And so I think that's another myth we need to clarify in our society, that, weight loss by any means necessary is always treated, is applauded, but not all weight loss is healthy weight loss or is helpful for the body development. So so I make sure I screen everybody for these disorders. So a typical treatment plan for someone who's working with me in my practice, again, my approach is a very holistic one. I want to figure out, when I see you, like, we're moving beyond calories in, calories out, and breaking that old diet culture. So really get into the meat of what are your unique weight gain triggers. So we're going to delve deep into what are the psychological, what are the physiological, the biological, even certain medications can trigger that. What are the mindset issue? What are the coping mechanisms that you have for your lifestyle, for your eating habits, for your exercise exercise habits. And then what centers you, what grounds you? Is your spirituality in alignment? Is your emotional health in alignment? So we will go dig deep, because in order to really, first of all, I always say weight loss without wellness is dangerous, right? And that's that we can't divorce the two. And then once we establish that, we're going to figure out a lifelong strategy and a lifelong plan, because if any of these things is off, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain weight loss. This is why, people focus on just the physical, and then they end up with an eating disorder, because they've only focused on the food and what they're eating, but they haven't delved into the motivation behind it, or the trauma or the issues that have happened in the past that
Right.
led them to develop that sort of eating pattern.
Yeah, and you're so right. I think, we say, we laugh when we say, girl, get your mind right. But that is it's so important, because what we think affects everything in our lives, who we choose as a mate, as a
Oh,
friend,
yes.
our just how we walk along life. And if we are
Mm-hmm.
just not, and I love that you say even spiritually, you
Mm-hmm.
know, even our spirituality
Absolutely.
makes a
And
difference.
so at Embrace You, we delve into each one of those. And people always will say, I thought I was coming for weight loss, but I've gotten so much more, right? Because it
Yeah,
is the wellness component of it. And the goal is really for you to develop a lasting plan, that you don't have this to be your last weight loss stop and your last weight and wellness stop. And I think that's the key piece that's missing in a lot of programs and a lot of approaches. So whether it's a diabetic, we need to tailor the treatment to you, or whether you have binge eating disorder, we need to tailor the treatment to you. So whatever it is, making sure that we're reaching you there at that level.
yeah. Before you leave, because we're waiting on our next guest to come in, tell us about your weight loss journey, because I know this is personal for you.
Oh, absolutely. So my spark, or my passion into obesity, started very young. My grandmother, who I'm named after, she was the original Sylvia, as I like to say. She came she came to live with us after being in the Liberian Civil War
Oh
for
wow.
almost 10 years. And because of that, she didn't have any health care. So she had obesity, developed all the complications, diabetes, hypertension, eventually went blind from glaucoma,
Oh
and
my
then had a massive stroke. So this left a huge impression on me for a young age, which led me to want to go into medicine. But I also developed a fat phobia, to be perfectly honest. So had a lot of restrictive eating. When I look back at my journals from age 15, I was calorie counting. I'm like, a 15-year-old should not know the calories of
Yeah,
everything,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I recognize that now. But then the counteract is that when I got to college and med school, became an emotional eater. And so I was using a lot of candy and sugar. Fortunately, had the metabolism to keep up with that until I had my first child and gained 60 pounds. And that's when, genetics meets lifestyle, and I had obesity. And so it took about 2 years for me to have my wake up call, which was the impact on my energy, my confidence. And so I really then had to change my relationship with food, with myself. And I really realized that it wasn't going to be negative talk or bullying myself or even coming up with unhealthy eating patterns, but self love and personalized science. And so that was what I used to get myself back to wellness, get myself back healthy, and developed a real passion and a keen understanding of obesity from both a personal perspective and
Right.
from a scientific perspective. So I really love to help people stop obsessing over the scale, which is what it took for me. I needed to stop obsessing over that number and really start the work from the inside out.
Yeah, as everything does. Like I said, everything really starts from the inside out. That's
Hmm.
Dr. Sylvia Bole. She is a double board certified obesity expert, healthy lifestyle champion, specializing in empowering women to stop obsessing over the scale. I love that. Embrace self love and personalized science to get to their happy, healthy weight and optimal wellness. As I said before, she's CEO and lead physician of Embrace You Weight and Wellness. Her website is up on the screen to the right. She believes in choosing to embrace you is the foundation of lifelong weight loss and wellness. Her information is on the screen. So if you or someone you know needs some information, some help, some assistance in doing all of that and getting your weight in order, please contact her. She is in the DMV area, but because of COVID, we know now that we can have healthcare professionals anywhere in the world,
Anywhere.
via
Mhm.
telehealth, telemedicine. So please contact Dr. Sylvia Boley. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have just been such a wealth of information. And like I said, just so much great information about this topic that just we don't talk about enough, not only in our community, but in general.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, thank you for the work that you do and continuing to just spread the word, because knowledge is power. And
It
with
is.
that, you can transform your health, you can transform your life, you can transform your legacy. And so I'm so happy that you're doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Wellness Wednesday is brought to you by In It Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. Please continue to post and share this information out so we can get the message to the masses. And listen, if you need some help getting your diabetes together, if you have diabetes and you'd like to know about how to keep your diabetes manageable, Dr. Nancy Richburg is looking for you to participate in a virtual class this month. If you live in South Carolina, you can register. You can see the information on the screen there. The program is statewide, year-long program on Zoom. Coming up, we've got a vaccine update from the folks at DHEC. That and more next on Coping with COVID. I'm Trey Taylor.
Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and DHEC's Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management.
Coping with COVID with Trey Taylor.
Need health insurance? Call Javis at 803-419-1001. Javis can get you health insurance premiums as low as $0, plus other low-cost and affordable options. 803-419-1001. Let Javis help you file your taxes. And if you need it, get a cash advance from $500 to $6,000. Javis Tax Services, 803-419-1001. JavisTax.com.
This flu season arrives during the COVID-19 pandemic. Groups at risk for serious illness from COVID-19 and flu are similar, but complications from flu are much higher in young children. Everyone over 6 months of age should get a flu shot to help prevent more illnesses, hospitalizations, and deaths in South Carolina.
The flu is not just a cold. Each year, many South Carolinians are hospitalized from the flu and even die.
Getting the flu vaccine is the best protection against the flu for everyone in your family.
The flu vaccine is safe, effective, and does not cause the flu.
You can make a difference this flu season by protecting yourself from the flu.
It's important that I protect my baby.
It's important that we protect our families.
It's important that we protect our schools.
And our students.
It's important.
It's important.
It's important.
It's important that we protect our state.
Talk to your healthcare provider, pharmacist, or health department about the flu vaccine today.
Every cookie sold in the Girl Scout Cookie Program helps girls learn lifelong lessons in people skills, decision-making, and goal-setting. It's amazing how much you can learn from a cookie.
Celebrating Black History Month, Coping with COVID presents African American First. Pastor Alex Sands is the first Black president of the South Carolina Baptist Convention. He'll lead the South's oldest Baptist convention with its over 200 church affiliations into its 200th year, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and true unity. An engineer by trade, Sands founded Kingdom Life Church in the upstate in 2003, where he pastors the large multicultural congregation. Pastor Alex Sands, the first African American to lead the South Carolina Baptist Convention. Celebrating Black History Month, Coping with COVID presents African American First from Taylor Made Productions.
I'm Trey Taylor, and you're watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It's Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by In It Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. Well, we were supposed to have a vaccine update from the folks at DHEC. The doctor had to leave unexpectedly. So we're going to bring Dr. Sylvia Boulay back on. She's a double board certified obesity expert, healthy lifestyle champion. So glad you didn't leave. Specializing in empowering women to stop obsessing over the scale and embrace self-love and personalized science to get to their happy, healthy weight and optimal wellness. She's CEO and lead physician of Embrace You Weight and Wellness, and believes that you should choose to embrace you. That's the foundation of lifelong weight loss and wellness. I'm glad you were able to come back on, because you know what? I want to ask, what do people need to do if they suspect a family member is struggling or experiencing some eating disorders? Because like anything, this affects everybody in the family, and your family and friends have a responsibility too.
Absolutely. And, my heart goes out to the family, to the sufferer, but also the families as well, because they have a very tough role trying to bring awareness, especially in the case of the anorexic. I think the first person, or the person with anorexia, I think the first thing that you need to do is probably enlist help, because this is not something where it will be probably very successful where you're doing it by yourself. So the first thing I would want to do is schedule an appointment if it's someone who is underage, where a lot of these eating disorders are going to be diagnosed in the teenage years, right? So they're still under parental supervision. So scheduling that appointment with the pediatrician beforehand, going ahead and giving them a heads up of what is going on and what you suspect may be going on. That way they can do the formalized screening, do the appropriate testing, and then you can gently bring the topic up with the person. Because also be aware that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to probably take multiple encounters, multiple visits, multiple redirections in order to help them see. And also, it's the average amount of treatment time is going to be between 6 months to a year. So it's a lengthy process to kind of deprogram this behavior once it's started.
What about warning signs? How do we know that something is happening to someone in our family?
So it's going to be a little bit different for each one of them. But let's take anorexia, for instance. If you notice that they're excessively commenting on their body, I think the one commonality probably amongst all of them is just an over acute awareness of their body, over acute awareness of weight gain or losing weight, but more especially that the fact that gaining weight, or like I talk about that fat phobia, really afraid of what will happen if I gain weight. And then maybe continuing to have body image issues even after they've lost appropriate amounts of weight, or even after their body weight is below. Other signs you may be able to see, so outside of seeing their clothing but not fitting appropriately, but some of the physiological signs would be where they are starting to show signs of starvation. So brittle hair, brittle nails, yellowing of teeth, yellowing of hair, of the nails. Also, for the bulimic, you may see signs like that they have a lot of scratches on their hands. That's from the self-induced vomiting.
Oh my God.
Is one of the things. For the binge eater, you may be finding food in uncommon places. So like, in their room, they have large stockpiles of food in the car, in the office. So really, these are some of the clinical signs. And these diseases are deadly. They really are, especially when it comes to anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. I think it's important to remember that these can lead to serious medical consequences. These people get electrolyte derangements. So their heart may go into abnormal rhythms. They may not have the nutrients they need for their muscles to function. They get excessively weak, tired, fatigued. It's really devastating to see in clinical practice and in life, and especially for a family member that's looking at that going on.
Right. Dr. Sylvia Boulay is a double board certified obesity expert, healthy healthy lifestyle champion. She is with Embrace You Wellness. Mitchell Peace Joy Jen wants to know, Dr. Bole, can you discuss BMI? Does the BMI index take into account various body types? Thank you, Mitchell, for your question.
Oh, thank you so much. She asked one of my favorite questions, and I think I have a whole blog post there, and I love discussing BMI. So BMI, the body mass index, let's tell the history, let's tell the story of the BMI. So the BMI actually started in 1832 by a guy named Quintlet, who was a Belgian man who was actually a anthropologist. And he found that, he found this interesting observation. If you take a little baby and you watch them grow, that if you take their weight divided by meters squared, their growth will be proportional to that. He said, this is an interesting phenomenon. So all he did was file that away. It's interesting phenomenon. He came up with lots of charts looking at the Belgian people. Fast forward to the 20th century, then we have someone called Ansel Keys, who actually did our starvation studies. And he figured out the calories. So he's like the father of modern nutrition. And he's an American physician. So he unfortunately, though, had a bit of a fat phobia. This is recorded too. So I'm not spreading rumors. And so when it came time to figure out how should we quantify health, because back then they were using something called life insurance tables. And so he said, why don't we go back to this little calculation I read about by this Belgian philosopher called, with the kg and the meter square, let's call that a body mass index. And we're going to use that as the indicator of health. And we're going to pair it up with weight. So let's pick up this cutoff for where the weight should be. And that is going to be obesity. And so basically everyone said, oh, this is a great idea. And so in 1985, it's adopted by the National Institute of Health. Now, the fundamental flaw in the BMI is it only looks at total body weight. It doesn't take into account your body fat percentage, which is really when we look at obesity or we look at the risk of disease, or even for something like anorexia, part of their problem is they don't have enough fat. And the fat is a functional organ in our body. It has hormonal properties. It regulates a lot in our bodies. So part of their problem is they have too little fat, and then obesity is you have too much fat. But you can't tell that just by looking at someone's arbitrary weight. You really need to look at their body composition. So that's one of the biggest flaws with the body mass index. So what we're starting to see now is that there's problems when you look at it, apply it to big groups of people. For instance, women, it tends to overestimate or be abnormal for us. Black people, so we have more lean muscle mass. So the BMI tends to overestimate that we have obesity because we actually may be healthier at a higher weight. And then the other person as well is age. So younger people have more muscle mass, so they tend to be healthier at a higher weight as well. So it's important to take all of this into account. But I love talking about the history because when you think about it, it's kind of like, this is so random. How did it come that way, become this? And so it does. So to answer your question, Mitchell, no. That's a long doctory way of saying no. It does its best. What the BMI is best used for, especially at this point, is possibly as a cutoff to tell you when you are at risk for obesity or weight-related diseases. That is the best cutoff for it. And then in the case of eating disorders, since our definitions, especially when it comes to anorexia nervosa, have been set by the BMI, it also tells you the threshold when your body weight is too low, and you are at risk for the complications of having too little body fat. So that is what the BMI is best used for, but it's not going to take into account, how your body weight distributes or how your body fat distributes. The waist circumference is a better tool for that, where you take a tape measure, put it at your belly button, go about 2 inches above your hip. That can tell you a little bit more in terms of body type, because some people do develop more weight in their center of their body. So I
Right. And
hope
why?
that answers your question.
Yeah. And why is that? Why does everything just sit right there in the
Well,
middle, girl?
now some of that
Why
I
do we have
know.
to always look like we're pregnant, girl? Why?
I know. Well, some of this again is biological, right? Like, and when we think about like how we were created and how we've evolved, there were
So
some
you usually
benefits to
blame it
that.
on Jesus, girl. You blame
I guess so. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. So I knew Miss Mitchell. I knew that's where you were going. Is it Mitchell or Michelle? So,
it's
but I
Mitchell.
knew Mitchell. Okay, I knew that's where you were going. So I knew she was bringing up these apple shaped, pear shaped,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yes. Okay. So really, okay, from a scientific perspective, those don't hold merit. They are more of a fashion description to be told. But I think we will see. I like to tell people I feel weight science or obesity science is really in its prehistoric age, right? So I think as we get more sophisticated tools for understanding body composition and body fat distribution, we probably will see that there is scientific evidence to uphold that. So people, but it's typically thought when you say pear shaped, those are going to be people who do not have as much central adiposity or don't have as much of that middle abdomen fat that we're talking about here. And so those people are thought to be actually healthier, but the body mass index isn't going to tell you much about that because all it's going to tell you is what the total weight is. So you're right. Someone who has a quote unquote pear shape at 175 pounds and someone who has an apple shape at 175 pounds, they may have, if they're the same height, they'll have the same BMI, but their metabolic health, so looking at their insulin resistance, whether they have pre-diabetes, diabetes, may look completely different because the apple shaped person is going to have more of that central fat that we talked about also.
Right. I want to ask you one thing before I ask you about a blog post that I noticed that you wrote. I want to ask about obesity as a major risk factor for COVID complications. We know that the pre-existing conditions, as again, you know, as people of color, we've got it all: high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and then the obesity issue. You know, we're coming into the game, you know,
I
already.
know. You're right. And, you know, it's just so, it's really, again, heartbreaking because the thing about it, I'd like to say that all COVID did was just magnify existing problems,
Absolutely.
existing disparities. And so, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing. And so, already we knew as Black people, as African Americans, we already had higher levels of these things. And then you just added this viral illness, which exacerbated that. But part of the issue, what we know more and more, is that COVID is an inflammatory disease. It's an inflammatory condition. And guess what? So is obesity. So again, I talked about once your your body fat percentage is over that threshold, which, okay, for the general population, for women, it's going to be greater than 32%. For men, it's going to be greater than 25% is considered having obesity level body fat. That body fat is dysfunctional. It's no longer serving the hormonal function it's supposed to. So what happens as those cells squish together, especially in that middle region, as they squish, trying to compact and fight more in there, you get a lot of things happening. They're releasing these harmful hormones and neurotransmitters, tumor necrosis factor, all these fancy named cytokines that cause the perfect storm that once you put COVID in there, which is an inflammatory condition, it just kind of snowballs and causes it to worsen even more because you already were in an inflamed state or an inflammatory state. And they're really thinking that is the reason why, because when you look at people like diabetics, they already have inflammation, right? Increased inflammation. When you look at people who, other conditions, CKD, heart diseases, all of these people are high inflammatory states. So when COVID is put in there with its inflammatory markers, it just really sets off a firestorm that leaves you really vulnerable for the complications of COVID. And
can you kind of backtrack it? Like right now, if you've not
Mhm.
gotten COVID yet, but you are overweight and you know you're at high risk, can you do anything right now that will really make any substantial difference?
Wow, that's a great question. Now, again, and see, this is where I'm always at war with the doctor randomized controlled trial
Yeah.
meta-analysis, Dr. Bowley versus Sylvia, the homegirl who wants to just tell you.
Come on,
So-
girl, give it to us straight, no chaser. Come on, homegirl Sylvia.
Okay, homegirl Sylvia. So homegirl Dr. Sylvia was to say, absolutely, because I'm also an optimist, right?
Yeah.
So of course they haven't done trials to see the impact of weight loss, yada yada yada. So must say that disclaimer. But of course there are things you can do. I think a lot of times what I would tell anyone today to start doing is reducing their inflammatory foods. The biggest one being white processed sugar, all this added sugar, white processed flour, all of these things, which, we know spike those sugar levels, increase your risk of insulin resistance, increase your risk of obesity, increase your risk of of the inflammation that we're talking about. So I would really start there by, if you're drinking sodas, if you're eating a lot of white bread, if you're eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of foods with a lot of chemicals, doing that and really getting your nutrition under control would be the first place. Another inflammatory thing we don't talk a lot about, stress. Okay, so they're talking about, this is next month will be Mental Health Awareness Month. And so the anxiety levels, the depression levels have gone sky high. And with the stress that comes release of chronic exposure to cortisol, which then chronic exposure to insulin, again, is all related, to a very similar pathway. So reducing your stress levels the way you can. And then sleep. Let's get some sleep, guys. Let's go try to set that bedtime. But I hear you though, because you said you have that 2-year-old.
Listen. But look, I go to bed when they go to bed at 8:30. I gotta go to bed because they're, you know how it is. You don't get any restful sleep. I'm listening, want to make sure they're okay. And 9 times out of 10, one of them little critters will come in my bedroom before 5 o'clock.
So I'm so happy my daughter, baby koala, she hasn't, which is what she calls herself now. She's like, I'm koala. I'm like, girl, please get over this. And so I'm happy she hasn't discovered she can come into our room. She thinks it's off limits. I'm like, thank you. But so yeah, I think that those are some things that people can do now to stop, this whole supplement thing is still controversial, but definitely we all are very vitamin D deficient. And there have been studies that show that maybe improving those levels could help, vitamin C. So I think, those are things that you can do now.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Sylvia Bowley is with us. She is with Embrace You Wellness. I wanted to ask you, but I don't have time. I wanted to ask you about this blog about how you embrace COVID courage and release your COVID-19 vaccine fears. But I want to have you back very soon, if not next week, next month, because we're going to have a conversation with some other physicians and some legislators about the COVID vaccine. And I want to know, as a physician, how you, about your blog, how you embrace courage and released your COVID-19 vaccine fears. And I think it's interesting as a physician that you even had fears. And we know that in our community, particularly, there's a challenge with, getting not only Big Mama and them, but Keisha and Jaheim, to be okay with getting this COVID vaccine. So I'd love to have that conversation with you very soon if you will come back.
Absolutely. I'll be happy to come back. I love having that conversation, and people can check it out on my blog post, what I wrote, but we can go more in detail here as well.
That would be great. You see the information on the screen, how to contact Dr. Sylvia Bowley with double board certified obesity expert. She is the CEO and lead physician of Embrace You Weight and Wellness. Please contact her. You see the information. And thank you, Sylvia, again so much for joining us and joining us again.
Awesome. Yes, I'll be back. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take good care, beautiful.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. You're watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. I'm Trey Taylor, and it's brought to you by It Together SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council. Listen, if you have a story that can help someone cope with COVID, please go to the Tailor Made Production Facebook page and inbox me. We would love to feature your story or your initiative. If you have a product or service that can help someone cope with COVID, please email copingwithtreytaylor@gmail.com. The information is scrolling on the screen. And we would love to have you be a proud sponsor, just like SCDHEC, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Palmetto Media Connections, also Agape Counseling and Training Centers. All of them are proud sponsors of Coping with COVID. Now, Thursday, coming up, City Councilman Sam Davis joins us. He is going to be retiring very soon, and he's going to tell us about past, present, and future achievements. And Brenda Blackstock with SC Thrive also joins us on Coping with COVID. Friday, we're going to talk with Overseer Danita Forbes on Faith Friday, Faith in the Midst of the Pandemic. That is coming up on Faith Friday, this Friday. As always, I leave you with a reading from Jesus Calling. Jesus says, on today, February 24th, be still in the light of my presence while I communicate love to you. There's no force in the universe as powerful as my love, Jesus says. You are constantly aware of limitations, your own and others, but there is no limit to my love. It fills all of the spaces, all of the times, and all of eternity. Now, you see through a glass darkly, but someday you will see me face to face. Then you'll be able to experience fully how wide and long and high and deep my love is for you. If you were to experience that now, you'd be overwhelmed to the point of feeling crushed. But you have an eternity ahead of you, absolutely guaranteed, during which you can enjoy my presence. It's unrestricted ecstasy. For now, the knowledge of my loving presence is sufficient to carry you through each and every day. That's your Jesus Calling for today, February 24th. I'm Trey Taylor. Until tomorrow, I wish you peace and abundant blessings. Thank you so much for joining us. Be careful, and don't forget to wear your mask over your nose and under your chin. See you tomorrow.
Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and DHEC's Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management.
Coping with COVID with Trey Taylor.